Hi, good afternoon. Actually, my name is Ron Mukherjee. I'm the managing director of Webcasts. But indeed, Wim Gerrits, who's the e-marketing manager from Bayer, was supposed to be here. Unfortunately, or fortunately for them, it's the 150th birthday of Bayer today. So he's celebrating that, but we have, since it's about online video, we have some videos from Wim who will supplement what I'm saying. Maybe a short word about Richcast. So we've been doing webcasts for corporate clients and government clients since 2007, both live and on demand, and in a number of different use cases. And the case that we're going to present today is really a case where all of the different aspects of our work are shown. So here you see an overview of what we've done for Bayer. So basically we started out with event webcasting, seminars, congresses, which then moved on to e-learning and marketing and communications. And we started with external webcasts, so towards external audiences, and then moved on towards also internal webcasts. So what we've seen in our corporate clients is that usually we begin with these external webcasts, and because that's something where there's a direct ROI on the webcast, and that then different departments start asking, can we do that too? And then we move on to the internal domain. As I said, we do these live and on demand, and I'll show you a number of examples of that.
The marketing campaign was needed because it was a new product, so it was a product launch, and we had to present it to the fans.
So what Wim describes here is one of the first webcasts that we did with Bayer in 2009, which was for the veterinarians, and where they had a specific need because they had some difficulties in getting the veterinarians to actually come to their events. And webcasting was seen at that time as a very good way to interact with their audience and also to enlarge their audience. Let's have a look at some of the examples. This was a series that we started in 2010 and is basically still ongoing, where you see here the layout is a very classic kind of webinar setup. What was very important from the start was the fact that we built in interactivity with the audience. So you have a box here under the video which is ask a question, which is a very controlled way of interacting with the audience. So it's a moderated question and answer session. And these webcasts for the veterinarians were part of a larger campaign and actually generated up to 5-6 times more audience for them during the live sessions than they would have when they invited people to different locations in the Benelux. So that was a successful start. I think it's very important when you get working with a corporate client to find those points where you can have a quick return on investment. So this was really a good case in point because the investment basically showed up very quickly, and Wim Gerrits was able to communicate that to the management, and we could build from there. Here's another example. This was more around events. So the previous webcast was something that was really set up particularly as a webcast, where there wasn't really an audience present. This is a different type of webcast where there was a live audience and where it would happen in different locations. Also outside of Bayer, so it could be in a hotel venue, it could be in a hall, which of course brought some challenges. I mean, we'll look at some of the challenges both technically and from a campaign side later. But then we did a whole series like these, where again the concept stayed the same. Even if there was a live audience, they also had the virtual audience. There was interaction, again through the Ask a Question modules, and where people could, when a question was asked, interact with the audience that was actually present. From the webcasts for the events and the marketing webcasts, we then moved on to a slightly different concept, which was around e-learning. Now, when we get asked to do e-learning, usually there's a strong element of content marketing in there. We're not asked that much to do pure e-learning internally. I think there's a lot of tools out there that can do that at a lower price point. But when we're asked to do e-learning for an outside audience, basically you could say they're resellers, because the doctors, the veterinarians are in a way the resellers of Bayer. Then other aspects come into the game, especially if you want to do live e-learning sessions, and also if you want to deliver a good quality of the webcast. So from the veterinarians, we then moved on to the human health department, and usually that's a bit difficult if you are in a corporate setting, because there's a lot of silos, there's a lot of departments that don't talk to each other, and how do you break that barrier? So by using the veterinarian example, which, as I said, yielded a result directly, that was a very good way to get started within Bayer, and then to move on to the human health department, which is actually much bigger within Bayer than the veterinarian department. And so these sessions were again recorded at different venues. I must say we have different models. So we use a servicing model. We work in Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany. We do a lot of servicing either ourselves or through partners, audiovisual partners. But we also provide tools that clients can use themselves. So you will see some of these webcasts were recorded by staff from Bayer themselves in a later stage, but in the first stages we were doing all of the servicing for these webcasts. Again, the same crossover happened. So we were working for the veterinarian sector. First of all, marketing communications, doing events, then moved into e-learning, or rather content marketing. And the same happened in the human health department. So where basically from the events that they were organizing, the different seminars for the doctors where people could interact live, we then got onto a more structured e-learning approach. And these webcasts were then linked to an LMS system where questions and answers could be sourced. We are now, I'll show this at the end as well, we're now working on an accreditation project with them. So accreditation means that the doctors can get points on their diploma when they come to seminars. And this also works for the webinars. So that's again an added value. It's kind of the next step for us. It's a bit complex to organize because, I mean, we're just the provider of the tools. But usually there's an outside authority that can give the accreditation. And we've done some projects like that for other pharmaceutical companies. And it's a quite exciting way to really link the webinars to the concrete added value for a client.
In Birmingham, it was an international product launch, so we took it up to a next level. And it was bigger, and there were more followers, and it was international. And we were part of a big organization events team, where you have to try to cope with many other things that you don't know about before, and you are a part of the team, and you have to learn to work in this setting that you cannot choose. You it's, you have to follow the guidelines for that day, and much more than when you would do it in a local country.
So working from the webcast that we were doing in Benelux, and mainly from Diegem near Brussels, we then sourced a number of requests from international events that they were organizing. And within the Bayer organization, this knowledge, these skills to do the webcasts were not present at that time. So that was a very interesting way to expand the webcasting work that we were doing into a more international field within Bayer. And here is a good example. So we mentioned this, the Birmingham case. So this was a big international event they were organizing. And obviously, again, as we were doing the webcast from Diegem itself with the constraints, the technical constraints that were present within Bayer, and then moving on to the hotel venues where there's a whole other set of constraints, this was, as he said, taking it to another level. Doing this internationally with suppliers sourced from the country itself, from the UK. We then had to look at, I mean, there were a lot of issues that came up. One example is that these webcasts were streamed using a cell muxing technology because the venue in Birmingham could not provide us with a sufficient strong internet line. So we usually need 2 megabit upload guaranteed. And this was not the case here. So we had to, I mean, it was also a learning process for us, really. We have been doing a lot of the webcasts in Belgium, Luxembourg, and usually getting the technical support that we needed. And this was a quite different case where we used cell muxing technology, but with the slides. So that was a particular challenge because usually cell muxing technology is you can have the video, but getting the slides with it was quite a challenge. But we'll come back to that when we go into more technical analysis. And next to the event webcast that we did there were also press launches. So within our clients, which are, I mean, a lot of pharmaceutical companies, but also banking, finance, IT, and as I said, government, the way to introduce live is a very good way is press launches, because it's very difficult to get journalists to come to the actual press launch. So this was again for them something with high visibility and a direct impact, where they could measure, this is the number of journalists, these are the questions that were sourced. So this was also part of a wider PR campaign. And this is something where, as we went along with the webcast, where we were expanding the number of webcasts and also the type of uses, where more and more we got integrated into campaigns, marketing campaigns, PR campaigns that were already existing. Then through the contacts with Bayer Benelux, we then got questions from Bayer France, who had actually witnessed the webcast from Brussels, and who had a very interesting concept. So what they wanted to do was basically broadcast events from Paris all over France. So we were working with 25 hotel venues, and the content was live streamed from Paris, and people could again interact. But the concept was a bit different. It was not individuals watching, it was the commercial representatives had invited their clients to come over to the hotel venue, and then they could watch and interact with the content, and then afterwards interact with their prospects and customers. So Bayer France had attempted these things before, but it didn't exactly succeed. I think here this puts the emphasis on a very important aspect with these type of webcasts, the logistics part and the whole scenario and the way that the workflow is set up. So I think if you're offering these type of services, that this is definitely a big part of the service that you're offering, is to actually examine with your client, to give consulting, and to come up with a scenario that's really workable.
In fact, we had developed, or the senior management had developed a new vision for the internal employees of Bayer Belgium and Healthcare Belgium. And it doesn't stop with a one-day workshop for all employees. You have to keep on communicating about the new vision and have it installed in the mind of your colleagues. And because it was for a big part based on innovation, we chose to use streaming and on-demand video to communicate about the new vision after the workshop on the vision. And it was the general manager of Bayer Healthcare who used this media to inform the colleagues about it.
So as I said in the beginning, so we started with external webcasts. We started doing the vets and then the human health, and then moving on from marketing communications to e-learning or content marketing. The next level within Bayer Benelux was the internal webcasts. Since we had proven by these cases that indeed this is an interesting way to communicate to their external audiences, it's a cost-effective way and it yields results, they then said, why don't we do this internally? Why don't we use this to really underpin the vision that we're trying to carry across? And since there are about 3,500 people in Bayer Benelux, this was a good way of doing that. So we started doing webcasts with the general manager. And the concept was that they would have management meetings, and several questions would come up during these meetings. And obviously the general manager couldn't be present they have about 10 locations in the Benelux, couldn't be present all the time at all of these locations. So they used this concept to, I would say, also enliven the intranet with video content, and then also to create a direct voice with the general manager who answers sometimes difficult questions that come up during these sessions. We'll come back to the security aspect. This is one of the issues that we encountered, especially within the pharmaceutical industry, where compliance is extremely important. So these internal webcasts were actually hosted within Bayer. And while the other webcasts, the external webcasts, of course, were also secured, I'll explain that a little more. This content definitely had to be kept inside. So it's good if you're offering a service to be really flexible on that level as well, to be able to say, okay, it's your content, you can have it, and we'll make it happen for you that you can actually use that content within your network. These were on-demand sessions, and then we started also doing some live sessions, also within the network.
So we had the worldwide CEO and CFO of Bayer coming over to Belgium, and of course everybody wants to see these persons in real life. But we have like something like 10 locations spread over Belgium and the Netherlands, and not everybody can come to the location to see in real life these persons. Therefore, we organized the streaming event so that everybody could follow the speech of these two persons from their desktop. And it's very nice because they also have the feeling to be involved, to be face to face with these persons. Like for the other cases, they were able to ask questions. The questions were responded by these persons, and of course the big advantage is that we didn't have to ask all people. We talk about 2,000 people to move over to one location. No, they just stayed on their place. They looked at it, and after 1 hour it was done, and they couldn't go to work. So that's cost-wise a major impact, of course.
So Indeed, this was something following from those internal webcasts that we were doing with the general manager of Benelux. We then had the opportunity to, on the occasion of the visit of the global CEO and CFO, to actually do a live webcast within Bayer Benelux. The big challenge here was that people had to be able to watch that on their desktops, on their mobile devices, and within the Bayer network. This was also, by the way, the first time that we really interacted with the IT department of Bayer Benelux. I mean, up till now, basically we had sort of gone under the radar because the external webcasts are hosted on our CDN, secured, and then the internal webcasts were basically just a bunch of files that they could host internally, but we didn't really need to interact very closely with the IT department up till that point. And this is also where Leverkusen, the headquarters of Bayer, got interested, especially because the global CEO was there. And this gave us a very high visibility within Bayer Benelux, but also global. I'll come back to the particular challenges, but it's clear that organizing something like this is again a very important logistics challenge, a communication challenge, and that you need a very good scenario to be able to pull this off. So it was very successful, and basically you will see this in the future perspectives at the end of the talk. But again, this brought us to a level where we are now talking together with our German partner of integrating a complete webcasting system within Bayer. So you see this progression within Bayer Benelux, starting from a very simple, but starting from a veterinarian webcast in 2009, coming up to this level.
Well, it's the product manager who decides on the content, of course, because it's his or her product. He makes a marketing plan on it, and he needs a scientific part of it because it's healthcare industry, so the scientific part is very important, and therefore he works together with one or more key opinion leaders to whom other vets listen or tend to listen very well when they talk about the scientific parts and the products.
So in this part, let's have a look at in this multitude of webcasts how things were organized from the level of content, from the level of the scenario, from the level of the technical setup, the logistics. Obviously, the first step, as Wim has just said, is basically deciding on the content. And you come into a situation within a corporate client like that, and they don't have the experience using the webcast, or they think it's just like their usual seminar, and it will just work. Well, that's not really the case. So you really need to define a strategy if you're doing live. How is that going to be embedded within a larger campaign? And specifically, what Wim just said, how is that content going to really pull in the audience? And how are you going to have people interact with that content? So that's really the crux of the matter. I would say the first step in defining a successful strategy is to really make that link between content and target audience.
First of all, you need this scenario. It should be very strict and very detailed, because it's not something like cooking in the kitchen and one time you do it like this and the other time like that. There is a lot of pressure because you are going live and you only have one chance. You really cannot mess it up, and therefore there is need for a very, very, very good scenario that all people involved know by heart and can always use whenever needed.
So sorry to hammer this point into you, but as we've said, the scenario is crucial. But what does that scenario really mean? What is a scenario? First of all, it's a scenario about the content. So when do you deliver which kind of content, in what kind of format, how long should it take? What's the attention span of your audience? On which type of device are they watching it? So it's really a combination between the analysis of the audience and the analysis of the content. And very quickly you get into the technical side, because if you're saying, okay, we want to distribute this on all devices, then how are people going to interact? How will they ask a question, etc. So we usually use these kind of workflows, which are based on basically the content strategy. So that's always the basis of it. We look at, okay, for the on-demand version, should we split up, for instance, the content into different pieces? Specifically around the e-learning content, we see a lot of demand around micro-learning, so where there's short pieces, maybe 3-4 minutes, even if you have a long event where you split up the content and where people can search on content. That's very important. And then based on the analysis of that part, the content, and the audience, we then come up with a technical model and say, okay, this is what we need. Usually these models are more complex in the sense that there's a whole campaign before that and after that. So how does it integrate with things like single sign-on? How does it integrate with an emailing campaign, and so on and so forth?
We had, of course, already an existing database of contacts. So what we did was writing them through email marketing. They were already subscribed to receive some newsletters. So we talked about the topic in these newsletters. Then once they were subscribed to participate, we sent them on regular timings reminder emails to make them aware of the event. And then, of course, and this is very, very important, we involved the sales reps on the field to ask them to talk about this event to the vets and ask them to participate to it. And this is something which is very important and maybe the most important thing in these kind of actions.
I see our responsibility as a vendor, specifically in the corporate market, to really provide that kind of service, the consulting part of it. When we look at the education market, it's maybe a bit different because there you can really deliver systems, which we also do in the corporate market. But in the corporate market, it's not really enough, specifically because you will be immediately asked for, okay, what's the return on investment? And in our work, we really have that aspect as a webcasting agency to look at, okay, in your campaign, what are the elements where a webcast could be interesting, and how can we set that up together with you? So here's a good example. Usually in our work, we have a collaboration between different partners. So obviously there are the internal partners at Bayer in this case. So the different departments, that's already one important aspect. And then there's going to be a number of outside partners. So in this case, a PR agency or a communications agency. Maybe there's going to be a web agency. Maybe they already have an audiovisual partner in certain cases, in certain countries. So it's basically how do you manage this whole small ecosystem which is coming about. When you start out with the first webcast, you don't have these issues, obviously, because you're just doing the webcast and delivering a service. But as it grows, you then have to really start interacting with, in this case, for instance, a whole campaign. And I think that the webcast can be really an added value in that, specifically because in the way that these webinars are organized, we're generating a lot of metadata. And that's really the difference with just okay, if you do a picture-in-picture, for instance, of an event, and you're putting the slides in, etc. What we're doing is we're extracting a lot of information from that. So we're doing character recognition on the slides, things like that, so that basically once the event is finished, you have this whole knowledge base. And that's something that can then go to different target audiences if it's conditioned in the right way. So it could, in this case, go to journalists, it could go to the prospects, it could go to internal audiences, etc. But it's really a question of, in the scenario again, looking at how do you condition that content for each target audience.
Security is all over the place, and it's very important for buyer. We needed a vendor that could customize its service on the security level to the buyer environment. So a vendor with a solution, but working completely in the secure and default environment of buyer. That was very important for us.
So again, this comes back to the remark I just gave, that we're not just supplying systems and then telling the client, okay, you take care of it. In the pharmaceutical industry, as I said, there are some very specific issues around security, compliance. There are some very strict laws. I don't know exactly the situation in the UK, but I guess it's much the same as in Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. That pharmaceutical companies, when they do their marketing, they can't really do it directly. So you can't, the pharmaceutical companies can't communicate with their end user, who are the patients. So they have to communicate with their intermediate audience or their resellers, which are the doctors, the veterinarians, and they have to do it in a very circumspect way. This, what Wim was talking about, the scientific content, is extremely important. Linking this to things like accreditation, as I said before, is a very good way of doing that. But it all has to stay within the very strict limits of what is possible on the level of content, and also technically, I mean, the security issue. So what we've done basically is, in the beginning, the first webcasts, we had a basic level of security. We were using SSL layers, encrypting content, video streams, using encrypted URLs with a token, so that when people would register via single sign-on or not, then they could be identified. There are also in the pharmaceutical sector some external providers of identification. There's a German company called DocPharma, DocCheck, sorry, who can identify an audience and then anonymize this information. So people log in through that channel, but we don't get the information on our servers, and buyer doesn't get it either. So basically they just get statistics on number of views, but that's enough for them because they want to measure the success of their campaign. So they just want to know, okay, I had so many views and this was the drop-off rate, etc. Then for the internal webcast, as I said, we needed another level of security. So that was basically hosting internally. In the beginning, we did that with just segmenting the content, making it very short, so that they wouldn't need, for the on-demand versions, a video server inside their network. But then when we started doing the live sessions, then obviously they needed these servers, these repeaters. We set up a number of repeaters within the Bayer Benelux network. And the CFO, CEO webcast was actually the first big project around that. So where so these were machines sourced by Bayer IT. They could validate the machines within their network. We set up the WOWSA, we use WOWSA. We set up the WOWSA servers for them together with them. And so that was the way we could get the whole thing validated for the live internal webcasts.
Well, we connected in a two-way direction, of course. We could reach many people compared to before through the live streaming. But from the sides of the followers, they were able to ask questions or have remarks which were then responded to immediately in the room and then again streamed to all followers at home.
So the reason we're stressing this point is that a big part of the successful progression within Bayer had to do with the interactivity which was built in from the beginning. We had been doing a lot of webcasts for clients previously, and where this aspect was not so to the forefront. And usually we saw that the retention rate would go down, or that the client would do a series of webcasts and then just stop. And I think if even by simple means like the ask a question box, if you can build in some interactivity right from the start, that's a very good way of selling the product. As you can see, this is a very different way of doing this if you compare it to things like WebEx or GoToMeeting or products like that, in the sense that this is communication from few to many. And where as I said before, the metadata is really a crucial factor. And that you're doing this live, but then also offering it as a knowledge base afterwards is a very important added value. But here what we saw is that during the live sessions, with the ask a question, which was not threatening to the client, because you could add a chat box to it if you're talking to a smaller audience, but can you moderate that? And that was a fear factor in the beginning with Bayer, that but anybody could ask any question. So for them this was a very good way of controlling that process and to say, I have a question here, and selecting the questions as they came in. Other means of interactivity are basically the tabs that you see at the bottom, where there is a navigate by slide and so on. So these are for the on-demand versions also good ways of making the content. A search box, for instance, is a good way of making the content very usable to their target audience. Sorry.
We had in the room where we did the webcasting 80 people invited, so we were able to give exclusivity about the topic to 80 people, but we wanted to give exclusivity to more than 80 people, and with the live stream we were able to give it to, let's say, 300 people.
So here we're just examining the difference between the live and on-demand versions.
The value is of on-demand version is in the increase of the share of voice that you have, because it doesn't stop with this one evening when we organize this streaming event. Afterwards, we offered it on websites, and then the sales reps on the field, they can continue talk about the subject to effects, and each time they can do it, they increase their share of voice, and this is, of course, very, very important for a product manager and for a sales.
So basically saying the same thing, but in a different way for the live and on-demand. Obviously, it's about increasing reach. Obviously, it's about getting their audience interested in their content. But the live versus on-demand debate, which we hear a lot with our clients and our prospects, because there's a huge fear around doing live stuff. Basically, they complement each other. So if you do a good live session and then you're able to use that as a resource, that works very well in the workflow. And I think nowadays, if you can alleviate that fear with a client that live is definitely possible, that is something that it's something to be overcome, but it's a real added value. So let's go a little more into the technical side now. So how did we do these things? Again, coming back to the scenario, the workflow, we proposed to them a workflow that we could use as a supplier, as a service provider, but that they also could use internally. So these internal webcasts that you saw, basically we provided a machine and they were recording the webcast. It's a very simple setup where basically one camera, there's not a lot that can go wrong, especially in a controlled environment if you're setting up a micro studio at a client's premise. But both for these internal webcasts that they were doing themselves and the event webcasts, also had big things like the Birmingham one, the scenario was always the same, and they could always refer to that same scenario. I think instilling trust is obviously the critical factor here. And usually when we deliver systems, that's something where we look at very specifically. We don't recommend clients to then move the machines around, or to, if they want to do it themselves, to have one specific setup in a specific room and to do it in that way. I mean, opinions differ about that, but that's usually how we bring in systems to a client. These are the machines that we use. So we've got different form factors. There's the one on the right is usually the machines that we use for servicing, because they have a lot of professional connections, XLR and this and that. If a client does it themselves, then we have the studio model, which is ideal for a micro studio setup, or the one that you see there, which looks a lot like one of the competitions. But so these are systems where we have different modes. So there is a simple mode, advanced mode. So if we're letting the client do it themselves, then we use the simple mode. We set up the whole thing, maybe remotely. But it also has a lot of advanced features that we can also use, or one of our resellers or partners can use when they want to do more advanced stuff. So when they go to the venue, they need to set up the line, they need to do some testing. In our concept here, we're also having, it's also like a small video mixer, so it doesn't have all of the possibilities of big video mixers, but you can switch sources. That was a problem that we had in the beginning, where if people would show films in their PowerPoint presentation, that we always needed an additional switcher and so on. So this was taken care of. Here we can just switch between the sources. You can do little things like add overlays and so on and so forth, but usually that's enough for the uses, corporate uses that the clients want to make. I would say the same is true for our templates. So you saw these are very similar templates for the output. We really chose the option to make it very simple. So not to have a lot of doodahs around it, but just to have a thing that works in all browsers and all devices, and that's it. So you're probably familiar with these kind of setups. So we're linking with a laptop of a presenter. Basically, the slides are captured on the fly. So I mean, that was also back in the day when we needed to have the slides beforehand and so on and so forth, and then people come in with their presentation at the last second. So we're just capturing basically the slides. Then we usually use these kind of robotic cameras or PTZ cameras, which are very handy in an event kind of setup, and which can also be controlled from a distance. So you could control them through the network, for instance, at a location. That's quite interesting. And then usually interacting with the sound system, which is present at the venue. This gets, if it's an external webcast, sent to our streaming platform. So we have a partnership with a German company called Ecotel, which is a telecoms provider, B2B. They have different data centers in Germany, and we're using their private cloud facilities. And then obviously it gets sent out to the different devices, and as I said, we're using Wowza as the media server. So here you see a little overview of our CDN capacities. You see there are also smart TV streaming. That's something I'll come back to at the end. We then have the video platform to manage stuff, and then using the infrastructure with Origin and Edge servers on the German CDN. Here you have a little view of our platform. So basically that's kind of a management layer that we're using to get all this data from the devices. Although people can also set up their own webinars in the platform. And then by the fact that we're separating this data channel from the video channel, you can do things like this, so where people can actually change slides individually, change the timing of the slides and so on. This was a debate that we had, is that really useful? I mean, are people going to change slides a lot? It's useful in an event setting because if people, like here, switch laptops and so on, and then you see the windows and the pictures of their children on the desktop, etc., etc., you want to avoid that, especially in a corporate setting. You want to have a nice presentation at the end. So live, that could go through, but when they want to use it afterwards, they usually ask you to clean up the whole thing and to have something that they can use as a marketing tool. So that's a handy tool for us. And then, as I said, the different outputs, we try to keep it as simple as possible. You see the one in the middle is a picture-in-picture. Sometimes, that's paradoxical with what I was saying before, but you must realize that we're still recording the metadata. So even if we do a live with a picture-in-picture, in the machine we're still recording all of the metadata so that we can publish afterwards in the formats that you've just seen. So we can really go different ways with that. I think one of the main key factors is, okay, you have a product, you have a solution, but how can you be as flexible as possible in that so that you can really start doing many different things within a client?
Well, the challenge was to, of course, reach more people than before, but then with the investments that we had to make with the Richcast solution, we had to pay attention to not spend more money than before. So we had to reach more people, but be more effective on the cost side. And that's something which was defined before we started, and something in which we succeeded very fine.
I would say the reason that we made this trajectory with Bayer is that in the beginning we came in at a quite low cost point. And that's something with corporate clients that could be a tendency to say, it's Bayer, so let's raise the invoice. But you have to be very careful with that. And I think if you can deliver a very cost-effective solution, the relationship can then grow, and then you can really start doing very interesting stuff. So the entry point is really quite important. From the perspective of internal challenges?
Of course, when you do an internal webcasting live, or streaming live internally, is in fact it's much easier to stream live outside, because you ask people all over the country to follow, and they all use their own line. And the challenge in Bayer was that everybody, all employees, are using the same line. And you have to be sure that they have good quality and that there is no package loss and so on. So in fact, you go outside your location, but then you go inside again, and all over the same line. And this is something we managed to do, and thanks to the Richcast solution.
So this is definitely something not to be underestimated. I'm also doing sales within Richcast, and I have a tendency to always say, yeah, it's possible. But I really learned to check back with our technical department, and this was really something. It was a technical challenge, but it was first and foremost a communication challenge. And because when you get into a corporate client, the IT is going to be probably like a bit of a bastion, and there's going to be a lot of psychological issues, or issues that have nothing to do with the technical side, but that are definitely going to come up. So that's to be taken into account.
Of course, it was about product launch, so you start from zero to something. So we decided, of course, not to measure the impact on sales, but concerning the cost per contact, we managed to have 1/4 of per contact compared to a traditional product launch without any screening on an event location with catering and so on.
So unfortunately, I'm not able to disclose exact figures about the results, but you already get an inclination of what is possible. I mean, if we can expand an audience to a factor of 4 or 5, that's already a very clear result. But I think there's also a number of other results which are maybe not so visible directly for the client, but which come about later, especially if you're building this knowledge base type of solution. In the beginning, they're just interested in, we want to do a webcast and that's it. And then we'll measure the results and okay. But as these projects grew, more and more they began to see that, this is very interesting, because on our intranet, on our websites, we now have this resource where people come and actually stay on the website. So there's a lot of results that are generated just by the volume of the webcast that you're doing. So here you see some of the statistics. That's obviously a very crucial point. You need really good statistics. Our statistics are generated on the level of the player. Now, the European privacy laws state that you can't link to a registration, or not directly, or you have to have a lot of opt-ins. But as I said before, for them the major information was that how long did particular doctors stay, not necessarily their name. So for them that was a good way of measuring. And through our API we generally mix this with Google Analytics, and that then goes to the marketing department.
Well, in healthcare industry, we don't use digital marketing to have direct impact on sales because there is regulation and we cannot sell online. When we do such activities, we always have as first objective to offer more services to healthcare professionals.
So that's something I already talked about. It might not be a direct approach within a corporate client, especially if you work in the pharma sector. Maybe you're going about the actual impact that they want to have. I find that sometimes quite ironic, because we have other clients in the banking, insurance sector, and they'll say things like, this is not about sales. So you have to work that into the concept, into the scenario, and really deal also with the undercurrents that are there. Now let's just quickly resume, and then we'll have some questions.
The big learning process is that with a streaming event, and if you use it for instance, product launch, you are involving many new departments in this marketing campaign. Many parties that were not involved before. For instance, you have to deal with facility management, you have to deal with IT department, you have to deal with legal part, before also, but this is talking about specifically about communication via online channels, and it's another legal topic. You have a corporate communications officer who also has some guidelines on how to behave online, and so you are involving a lot more people. And the learning process is that you have to involve it as usual from the very beginning. That process, key learning here is that you have to define it very fast and not forget anybody, because that's really that would really be a big problem at the end.
Okay, so that's something we talked about, the ecosystem that's growing, but it could vary. I mean, in the beginning, as I said, we didn't have to deal with IT directly. So it's really a process of, it's like a chess game, and then some other pieces come on, and then you just see how that works out.
The problem was that traditional product launch costs a lot of money per contact, and that we had in our setting, and in our traditional setting, not enough reach, and so we had to solve two problems: have more reach and be less expensive. And that's how we came up with the solution of bridgecast.
I think that really summarizes the reason why we started working with Bayer. But as you saw, I mean, starting from that beginning, a lot of things are possible. So, future perspectives. As I said, we're working on this accreditation projects. In the ecosystem, that means that there's going to be, yet again, another series of partners, another series of players. In this case, authorities, national authorities, European authorities who have the right to give these accreditations. So the game gets a little more complex. I mean, from a technical point of view, it's not so difficult to do these things. But from a political point of view, it's a lot more complicated. Internal webcasting system at Bayer. So as I said, we got into the radar of the Bayer IT Global. And through our German partner, we're now discussing, okay, how could we make this into a system that they can use themselves? Using also existing technology, so they have a lot of Cisco video conferencing systems, and the concept here is to look at, okay, how can we get that data from those systems and supplement, instead of just doing video conferences between the 10 locations, supplement that with outside broadcasts and internal webcasts as a knowledge base. And then finally, that's kind of still a future perspective, but we're working on 3-screen playout together with our German partner also, and basically having the same repository, the same content repository, also to be used for, because they have screens in all of the subsidiaries. So how could you use that same content without having to acquire another system to actually put these content into digital signage? But this is still a future perspective, but I see some possibilities there in the market growing, in the B2B area. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay. Yes?
How did you manage to get the slides in time with the video during the live broadcasts?
Yes. That's indeed a challenge. So in the software solution that we have, basically it's a software solution that's running on the machines. The principle is that the video is streamed, as you would stream any video, and then we post the slides, and the delay is set between the two. So that's how we do that. Yes. Ah, great. And then there's an XML that records the actual timings for the on-demand version. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you very much.